Hello, dear story lovers. At the amount of 1,000 subscribers, I will post a huge series of special stories for you. Subscribe now. The sprawling metropolis of Xeric was a marvel of alien ingenuity, a city that never slept, its skies crisscrossed with hovercrafts and shimmering with the glow of countless holographic advertisements. Towering above the chaos was the citadel of Krylox, an ominous black spire etched with pulsating neon veins. It was both a beacon of power and a warning to those who dare challenge the tyrant who ruled it. Inside the citadel, Lord Krylox surveyed his dominion. With his scaled, towering frame adorned in ceremonial armor, he was a fearsome sight. His voice, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very air, commanded obedience from all who heard it. Today, as part of his routine, Krylox inspected his vast collection of servants. They lined up in a grand hall of polished obsidian, trembling under his penetrating gaze. Among them was Elira, a young Calarian, whose species was known for their delicate forms and silver skin that shimmered like liquid moonlight. Elira had served in the citadel for 3 years, performing lowly tasks like cleaning, cataloging trinkets, and running messages through the labyrinthine corridors. She had learned to stay unnoticed, blending into the background like a shadow. But today, Krylox's gaze fell on her. "You," he growled, his voice like grinding stone. "Step forward." Elira froze, her heart pounding. She obeyed, stepping out of line, her bare feet making soft taps against the cold floor. She kept her eyes lowered, as was expected, but she could feel the weight of his scrutiny. "You've been in my service for years," Krylox said, circling her slowly. "Yet I see no value in you. No strength. No cunning. Nothing." The other servants dared not look up, but Elira could feel their silent pity. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but fear choked her words. "You are useless," Krylox declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I have no place for weakness in my ranks." He snapped his clawed fingers, and 2 towering guards stepped forward. Without a word, they seized Elira by the arms and dragged her toward the grand doors. She struggled, not out of defiance, but out of sheer desperation. "Please," she cried, her voice trembling. "Give me another chance." Krylox raised a hand, silencing her. "You've had all the chances you deserve. Be gone." The massive doors groaned open, revealing the chaotic streets of Xeric. The guards flung Elira out, and she stumbled, falling to her knees on the hard pavement. The doors closed behind her with a resonant thud, sealing her fate. Elira sat there for a long moment, stunned. Around her, the city moved on, indifferent to her plight. Beings of every shape and size bustled past hulking Branax traders, insectoid SLYNNS, and robed Calorians floating inches above the ground. Neon signs flickered overhead, advertising everything from exotic wares to illegal pleasures. The air was thick with the hum of hovercrafts and the cacophony of alien languages. Elira slowly got to her feet, her silver skin smudged with grime. She clutched her arms, shivering not from the cold but from the crushing weight of rejection. She had no home, no possessions, and no idea how to survive in this unforgiving city. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the streets grew darker, the shadows lengthening. Elira wandered aimlessly, her mind racing. Every corner she turned seemed more hostile than the last. She passed alleys filled with scavengers and predators, their eyes glinting with malice. She avoided them, keeping her head down, her movements cautious. By the time the twin moons of Xeric rose, Elira had found a small alcove behind a defunct kiosk. She curled up there, her silver skin reflecting the dim glow of the moons. Her stomach growled, and her limbs ached, but the deeper pain was in her chest, a hollow ache where hope had once been. As she drifted into a restless sleep, the sound of laughter and chatter echoed faintly from the streets. Somewhere out there, life continued unabated, bright and full of possibility. But for Elira, the darkness felt endless. Tomorrow, she thought, I will find a way to survive. Somehow. The streets of Zarek were a kaleidoscope of color and chaos, a place where the rich and powerful mingled above in glistening spires while the downtrodden scurried in the shadows below. For Elira, the city was an unforgiving labyrinth, every corner a reminder of her exile from the citadel. Days passed in a blur of hunger and fear, and nights were spent curled in dark alcoves, shielding herself from the cold and the prying eyes of predators. Elira quickly learned the rules of survival in Zarek. Begging was futile, the wealthy passed her without a glance, and the poor had nothing to spare. She scavenged what she could, picking through refuse left behind by the city's elite. The Calarian's once glowing silver skin grew dull with grime, her delicate frame thinner with each passing day. Her first glimmer of hope came when she stumbled upon a small marketplace in the lower tiers of the city. The air was thick with the scent of alien spices and the hum of bartering voices. Vendors peddled their wares from stalls cobbled together with scrap metal and neon tubing. Elira wandered through the market, her eyes darting to the vibrant displays of food and trinkets. A fruit stand caught her eye, its offerings an array of vibrant, pulsing orbs that seemed to hum with life. Her stomach clenched painfully. She knew the risk of stealing in Zarek, punishments here were swift and brutal. But desperation overpowered her fear. As the vendor turned to haggle with a customer, Elira reached out, her fingers brushing the cool, smooth surface of an orb. "Stop! Thief!" The vendor's voice boomed, cutting through the noise of the market. Elira froze, clutching the fruit as the vendor lunged toward her. Panic surged through her, and she bolted, weaving through the crowd with the vendor hot on her heels. The market erupted into chaos, vendors shouting and customers scattering. Elira's heart pounded as she darted into an alley, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The alley ended in a dead end, and Elira turned to face her pursuer. The vendor, a burly Branax with mottled green skin and 4 arms, loomed over her, his expression a mix of fury and triumph. "Thought you could steal from me, huh?" he growled, advancing. Before he could grab her, a new voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." The vendor paused, glancing at the source of the interruption. A tall figure stepped into the alley, her silhouette framed by the glow of a nearby neon sign. She was human, her features sharp and commanding, with auburn hair tied back in a loose braid. She wore a fitted jacket adorned with patches from various interstellar expeditions. "This isn't your business, human," the vendor spat. "She stole from me. And I'm willing to pay for it," the woman replied, her tone calm but firm. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small coin-like object. It glowed faintly, its surface etched with intricate symbols. "Here. This should cover the cost." The vendor eyed the coin warily before snatching it and grumbling under his breath. He cast a final glare at Elira before lumbering away. The woman turned to Elira, who was still clutching the fruit, her eyes wide with shock. "Are you all right?" the human asked, her voice softer now. Elira nodded hesitantly. She had never met a human before, only heard tales of their resilience and unpredictability. This one seemed different kind, even. "I'm Captain Elira Mason," the woman said, extending a hand. "What's your name?" "Elira," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nice to meet you, Elira." Elira crouched to meet her eye level, her expression gentle. "You look like you could use some help. Why don't you come with me? I've got a ship not far from here. You'll be safe there." Elira hesitated, the fruit still clutched in her hand. She had learned not to trust easily, but something in Elira's gaze and unspoken promise of safety made her want to believe. "Okay," Elira said finally, her voice trembling. Elira smiled and stood, offering her hand again. This time, Elira took it, the simple gesture filling her with a faint flicker of hope. Together, they walked out of the alley and into the bustling streets, the human and the outcast Calarian heading toward an uncertain but promising future. For the first time in weeks, Elira allowed herself to hope. The horizon was unlike anything Elira had ever seen. The sleek, silver starship was a marvel of human engineering, its hull gleaming under the glow of Zarek's twin moons. As Elira followed Captain Elira Mason up the boarding ramp, her heart pounded with a mix of fear and wonder. The low hum of the ship's engines was steady and comforting, like a heartbeat. For the first time since her exile, Elira felt a flicker of possibility. Perhaps she had found a place where she might belong. Inside, the ship was just as impressive. The corridors were lined with panels displaying holographic readouts, and the faint scent of metallic coolant lingered in the air. Elira glanced around nervously as Elira led her to the common area, where a diverse group of crew members lounged around a circular table. "This is Elira," Elira announced, gesturing toward her. "She'll be joining us for a while. Be nice." The crew turned to look at Elira, their expressions a mix of curiosity and wariness. A burly man with dark skin and a cybernetic arm was the first to speak. "Another stray, huh, Captain," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "She's not a stray, Cade," Elira replied sharply. "She's a linguist." Elira blinked in surprise. "A linguist?" Elira gave her a small smile. "You've got a knack for languages, don't you? I saw the way you navigated the marketplace, understanding what everyone was saying. That's not a skill most people have." Elira hesitated, unsure how to respond. It was true she had an ear for languages. Calarians were naturally attuned to subtle tonal shifts and patterns in speech, but she had never thought of it as anything special. It was simply how she survived. Before she could say more, another crew member, a tall, wiry woman with short, spiky hair, stepped forward. "I'm Zara," she said, offering a hand. "I handle navigation and scouting. Welcome aboard." Elira shook her hand tentatively. One by one, the others introduced themselves: Cade, the ship's mechanic; Dr. Wren, a soft-spoken medic with an encyclopedic knowledge of alien biology; and Lena, a bubbly communications officer whose bright smile seemed out of place in the gruff crew. Elira clapped her hands, breaking the introductions. "All right, everyone. Let's give Elira some space to settle in. Cade, show her to one of the empty quarters. Elira, get some rest. Tomorrow we'll go over what we do here on the horizon." As Cade led Elira through the ship, she couldn't help but marvel at its intricate design. The walls pulsed faintly with energy, and the air felt cleaner, freer than the smog-filled streets of Zarek. Cade opened a door to a small but comfortable room with a bunk bed, a desk, and a tiny viewport overlooking the stars. "Here you go," he said, crossing his arms. "Not much, but it's better than an alley, huh?" Elira nodded. "Thank you." Cade grunted, then added, "Look, the captain's got a good eye for people. If she thinks you're worth something, you probably are. Just don't screw it up." With that, he left, leaving Elira alone. She sat on the edge of the bunk, her fingers brushing the soft fabric of the blanket. For the first time in weeks, she felt clean, safe, and warm. The next morning, Elira gathered the crew in the common area for their daily briefing. A holographic map of the galaxy hovered above the table, its stars and planets glowing softly. Elira began, "I need your help with something. We've been tracking a distress signal from an uncharted system. The language in the transmission is unknown, but I think you might be able to decode it." Elira's eyes widened. "You think I can help?" "I don't think I know," Elira said with a confident smile. "Let's see what you've got." Lena brought up the transmission on the main display, and Elira listened intently. The voice was garbled, the words fragmented, but there was a rhythm to it, a structure she recognized. Closing her eyes, she replayed the sounds in her mind, sorting through the pieces like a puzzle. "It's Calaxian," she said after a moment. "An old dialect, but I can translate it." The crew exchanged impressed glances as Elira worked, her fingers flying over the console to decipher the message. Within minutes, she had the translation. "Ship damaged. Need assistance. Survivors aboard. Coordinates attached, she read aloud. Well done, Alara said, her expression proud. Set a course, Zara. Let's see who needs our help. As the horizon shot through hyperspace, Alara couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose she had never known before. She wasn't just surviving, she was contributing. For the first time, she felt truly useful, and the crew's acceptance warmed her in a way she hadn't thought possible. The horizon had become more than a ship, it was a sanctuary, a place where she could redefine herself. And as they sped toward their next adventure, Alara vowed to prove that she belonged. The horizon emerged from hyperspace in a burst of light, arriving at the coordinates Alara had deciphered. Before them loomed a shattered Calaxian cruiser, its once mighty hull riddled with debris and glowing faintly with emergency lights. It drifted in the void, silent and ominous, like a ghost ship. Captain Alara Mason stood at the helm, her sharp eyes scanning the wreckage. Status? Minimal power readings, Zara reported from the navigation console. Life signs are faint but detectable. They're still in there. Prep for a boarding operation, Alara ordered. Alara, you're with me. Your understanding of Calaxian will be critical. Alara's heart raced. Though she had proven herself with the translation, this was something entirely different. Yet as she followed Alara to the equipment bay, her fear was tempered by determination. She donned a lightweight suit and oxygen pack, her fingers trembling slightly as she fastened the clasps. You'll do fine, Alara said, resting a hand on her shoulder. Stay close, follow my lead, and trust your instincts. The Horizon's shuttle detached and approached the derelict ship with practiced precision. Alara sat quietly as Kate piloted, the hum of the engines filling the small cabin. Through the viewport, she could see the cruiser's gaping hull breach, a jagged tear that exposed its darkened interior. The boarding party docked at the breach, and with a hiss, the shuttle doors opened to reveal the dimly lit corridor beyond. Alara stepped onto the cruiser's deck, the gravity weaker but functional. The air was cold and thin, carrying the faint scent of burnt metal. Alara led the way, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. Alara followed closely, her eyes darting to the alien markings on the walls. The Calaxian script was old and ceremonial, detailing the ship's mission and lineage. Despite the decay, it told a story of pride and purpose. Over here, Alara said, stopping at a sealed hatch. Faint banging came from the other side, followed by muffled voices in Calaxian. They're trapped, Alara said, stepping forward. She examined the control panel, its interface flickering weakly. I can override this, but it'll take a minute. Do it, Alara said, motioning for the others to stand guard. Alara's fingers flew over the console, her knowledge of the ancient dialect guiding her through the sequence. The hatch hissed, then groaned as it slid open, revealing a small group of Calaxians huddled inside. Their silver-scaled forms looked gaunt and exhausted, their dark eyes filled with desperation. Peace, Alara said in their tongue, raising her hands in a gesture of reassurance. We're here to help. The Calaxians exchanged wary glances before one of them, an elder with a scar across his brow, stepped forward. You speak our language, he said, his voice raspy but steady. I do, Alara replied. We'll take you to safety. Back aboard the Horizon, the Calaxians were given medical care and food. Dr. Wren worked tirelessly to stabilize their weakened bodies, while Alara stayed by their side, translating their stories for the crew. The elder, whose name was Tyrant, explained that their cruiser had been ambushed by pirates. They had barely escaped, only to drift helplessly until the Horizon arrived. You have saved us, Tyrant said to Alara, his voice filled with gratitude. I will not forget this. It wasn't just me, Alara said modestly, glancing at the crew bustling around them. It was all of us. But Tyrant shook his head. Without your understanding, we would still be trapped. You are a bridge between worlds, a rare and precious gift. Weeks later, the story of the Horizon's rescue mission had spread throughout the galactic corridors. Elira's role in deciphering the distress signal and bridging the cultural divide earned her recognition far beyond the crew. Alien diplomats and emissaries began reaching out, eager to consult with the Calarian linguist whose insight had saved lives. Back on Zarek, Lord Krylock sat in his obsidian throne, his clawed fingers drumming against the armrest. Reports of Elira's accomplishments had reached even his ears. The once dismissed servant had become a celebrated figure, her name spoken with respect across the galaxy. "How could I have been so blind?" he muttered to himself. His advisors said nothing, their silence a reflection of his error. Meanwhile, aboard the Horizon, Elira stood on the bridge, gazing out at the swirling nebulae. The crew had become her family, and the ship her home. She no longer felt like the castaway who had been discarded as useless. She was an integral part of something larger, her skills valued and her presence welcomed. Elira approached, a smile on her face. "You're a long way from that alley in Zarek." Elira turned to her, her silver skin glowing faintly in the starlight. "Thanks to you. You saw something in me when no one else did." Elira chuckled. "All I did was open the door. You're the one who walked through it." As the Horizon prepared for its next journey, Elira felt a sense of pride and purpose she had never known before. She was no longer defined by what others thought of her, no longer the outcast Calarian cast aside by a tyrant. She was Elira of the Horizon, a rising star in the vast expanse of the galaxy.